I've been thinking a lot about purpose lately. Like, what gives us purpose? I found sometimes purpose is found in the hardest moments. Holding the hand of a loved one at the end of life. A recent story of mine. Other times, it's as simple as answering a question at a cocktail party. When somebody asks, so what do you do? In both moments, the answer is not really about the job. It's about identity. It's about why. And when leaders help their teams connect to that deeper sense of purpose, they unlock something extraordinary. And that's what I want to explore today. About 2 months ago, my baby brother died of cancer. He was 37. My family and I were gathered in a hospital room. My brother, my sisters, his wife, or my sister-in-law, 5 medical professionals. And together we faced an incredibly difficult decision, whether to move from life support to hospice. We talked about this for 90 minutes. We walked through every option. He was on 3 kinds of life support: ventilation, 2 different blood pressure medications. Removing any one would mean he couldn't continue. Keeping them all up, as one doctor put, will keep his heart pumping for a very long time. After this long and painful conversation, we all agreed that letting him go was the right thing to do. And when it was over, the medical professionals told us, they said, I wish every family was like yours. You're so thoughtful. You're so united. You care for your brother so much. This makes our job easier. And I turned back to them and I said, I want to thank you. I want to thank the medical professionals in this room. And I'd like to go one step further. Think of the person who convinced you that the medical profession was right for you. Who was that? Was it an aunt or an uncle or a parent? Did you encounter somebody who was sick and you said, I want to help? Was it a teacher who said, I think you should go to the medical field? Whoever that is, next time you see them or talk to them, please thank them from me and my family for encouraging you to step into this work so you can guide us through this day. I saw 3 or 4 of them wipe away tears. And what they were feeling in that moment was purpose. They already had it, but I just kind of helped make it personal for them. And I meant it. And that's what I'm thinking about now. Purpose is identity. One of my great friends was in town recently in Boston. He came from LA. Speaking with him, and the idea of purpose came up. You know, we're both in our late 40s. And as I've just read in Dan Goleman's latest book called Working with Emotional Intelligence, this is the age when people start to rethink their purpose in life. People change careers a lot of times in their late 40s because they start questioning purpose. Imagine you're at a cocktail party, right? You're asking people, or you're asking, what do you do? And the answers come back. I'm a Marine. I'm a firefighter. I'm a painter. These aren't just jobs. These are self-identities. And if you push one step further, why? Why did you become a painter? Why did you go into firefighting? The answers are powerful. Firefighters might say, I wanted to save lives. A police officer might say, I wanted to protect my community. Those are why statements. They're expressions of personal purpose. And as leaders, we create a shared why for our teams. And when we do that well, we create something really powerful. We create this shared identity. We're helping people connect their individual sense of self to something larger when that's all the same thing. And when people pursue their personal purpose while achieving team goals, the results can exceed anything we can imagine. So Pixar does this really well, right? This is in Daniel Coyle's book called The Culture Code. He says that on everybody at Pixar has the same first day of work. You could be starting as a director. You could be a barista in their cafe. And during that first day, you sit in the film studio where they screen their movies every day. You sit in the 5th or 6th row where the directors sit during those screenings. And they say, whatever it is you used to do, you're a filmmaker now. We need you to make our films better. So I'd like to reach out to a barista at Luxo Cafe at Pixar and talk to them. I'm gonna try to make that happen. If anybody knows somebody, just write me. But I want to ask them, what is it that you do? And I can only imagine, like, working there must be so fun, right? I think they're going to say, I'm here to help make movies. Like, can you imagine? I'm a Pixar nut. My family loves their stuff, right? And I'd love to make a cup of coffee for Pete Docter or Brad Bird. I'm fueling their creative process. I'm helping them, satisfy their physiological needs so they can go and create a great movie that I'm going to love and I'm going to feel part of it. And in fact, if I'm that barista at the Luxo Cafe, I'm also going to show up in the credits. They're brilliant at creating a shared identity for everybody. You're all filmmakers. There's a famous story, whether it's true or not, we'll never know, but, President John F. Kennedy goes to Kennedy Space Center and he sees a janitor there mopping the floors. And he says, hello, sir. I'm Jack Kennedy. What is it that you do here? And he says, I'm putting a man on the moon, sir. The man mopping the floors says he's putting a man on the moon. He's connected to the greater purpose. I think if you were to talk to the founders of Google, what are their names? Sergey Brin and, I can't remember the other guy's name. Anyhow, if you ask them what they're doing, what their purpose is, they'd say, we're organizing the world's information to make it more accessible. That's what Google did. And that's what they continue to do. And that's, when they bought YouTube, they're still doing that. They put a search algorithm in there that helps organize the world's information to make it more accessible. It's one of the most, I think it's the second largest search engine in the world behind Google itself. So you're creating something really, really powerful when you create a shared identity. And that's the power of the why statement. The why statement goes above the what statement. You often hear me talk about this, about finite goals and infinite goals. I'm actually recording this in a hotel in New York. You probably hear an airplane flying overhead, and that's coming from LaGuardia Airport. And when I was driving here, I drove across the Throgs Neck Bridge in New York. And, I'm just looking at the thousands of rivets that are in this bridge. You can see them kind of at eye level, on this horizontal beam. There's all these suspension cables, this lighting, there's protection built into every element. The cables are covered, the suspension cables are covered in case there's a car crash or something like that. You won't minimize the damage to the bridge. I mean, this bridge took hundreds of people to build, steelworkers and engineers and electricians, and they all needed to be fed. They're all bound together by the same why, to connect the Bronx and the Queens across the East River, giving New Yorkers and travelers a fast route between Long Island and the mainland. And, it's the same in every domain. I have a friend of mine who's a Marine. I was just talking to him the other day. He's a retired Marine. And he pointed me to the Marine doctrine. And, they've got this ethos of honor, courage, and commitment. And their core purpose is serving to the core, the Marine Corps and the country. That's like really powerful stuff. And so leaders, that's our work. Our work is to help people connect to their personal why and the team's shared why. When people can pursue their personal purpose while pursuing team purpose, that's really, really powerful. And when we do that well, we capture not just their minds, but their hearts. And when their hearts and minds are aligned, there's no limit to what we can achieve. Longtime listeners will remember this story of the transformational team that didn't transform. There was a really high-level meeting that was pulled together. This engineering development was not going well in this particular business. And a functional leader of 1,200 people, gathered a small group of leaders together, and I was one of them. There were about 10 or maybe 12 people in the room. And we talked about what we needed to do to improve the development efforts. There were dozens of development efforts in this organization, and I was waiting to be asked to lead this effort, and it never happened. In fact, nobody was ever asked to lead this effort. And 12 extremely smart people with a lot of experience left that meeting, and they ran in different directions. And I'm not sure exactly what was really envisioned for that team, because it was never really clearly articulated. It was certainly never written down. There were a lot of ideas cast around that room, and all those ideas were pursued, but there was never a why that was really created. And the whats were not really clarified, and no leader was defined. And that really broke, what I've been searching, for a framework to help understand what went wrong and all of that. And, I think that's a lot of premise of what I'm looking at here. Just think of the definition of a team. This is, Richard Hackman from the book called Leading Teams. He says a team is a bounded, stable group of people interdependent on achieving a shared goal. So they're bounded, which means you know who they are. You know who the stakeholders are, and there's a clear leader. They're stable, which means the people on the team are not changing, or they're not changing often. And I'm going to pause for a moment just to unpack that. Think of a sports team. No matter who's on the pitch or on the court, you always know who's on what team. You can tell by their color of their jerseys. And so they're bounded. You know who you have to pass the ball to. You know whose feedback matters. It's not the fans, right? It's the coach and your players. And so it's bounded. Everybody is named. The team on the court is also stable, right? They are unchanging, except during substitutions. But even then, the team, the new people who come onto the court or the pitch are people that you have practiced with, which means you know them, which means you can improve with them. You can practice. The same with an engineering team, same with any business team. So that's bounded and stable. Common goal needs to be written down. I pushed really hard to get a charter written for that team, and I got pushed back so severely, I thought I must be crazy. And since then, I found a lot of cultures. I've just talked about Amazon a couple podcasts ago. I found a lot of cultures who have thought for a long time they don't need to write down goals, and then they realize they need to write these things down. They need to write down team goals. And all these cultures seem to think that they invented this idea, but they didn't. This goes way, way back. I have the document from Bell Labs. Big shout out to Sarah Poole, an archivist at Bell Labs archives. And she sent me the document that was used in 1945 to initiate the research project that resulted in the development of the transistor. Everything you're hearing today could not happen without a transistor. There's transistors in your car now. There's transistors in your phone. Everywhere there's electronics, there's a transistor. And that transistor was developed with a charter. There was a charter, and I have it in my possession. And that was written in 1945, and they completed it in December 1947. And you've maybe heard, there's a quote from Bill Gates that if he could go back to any date in history, he would go back to I think it was December 7th, 1947, the day that they got their transistor working. And so, and that was kicked off with a charter, and that was very validating. And, Amazon, writes up a press release and a frequently asked questions to even propose a project. I'm working on a story right now about the U-2 spy plane. And all the things that, all the merging streams that had to happen to make that spy plane a reality, and which was an incredible success. And it started with an originating document. And above that originating or contained in that originating document are all the world forces that were converging, in the Cold War that made this project so important. And it enabled the leaders of that project to help people articulate what it is that they do every day to themselves. Even though it's top secret, they couldn't talk about it until Francis Gary Powers was shot down in 1960, and the curtain came off the U-2 spy plane. People could finally say, "Hey, I designed that." But even though they could feel it in their bones, they knew why they were doing this. They knew the national importance of this, and you have to do this with projects big and small. I feel very strongly about that. I'm glad I can finally say this fully convinced with a research basis. And so those whys are about purpose. When an individual can pursue personal purpose, and they say, I am a filmmaker, and they see their contributions all the way to the film, from the cup of coffee they poured for Pete Docter. That is purpose, and it's on us to create it. That's all for today. I'm Evan Hickok. Thanks for listening to the Leadership Lighthouse podcast. I'll see you next time. Ciao.